Right now, somewhere in your house, a thermostat is quietly deciding your survival for you. You don't think about it. You don't have to. But strip that away. Take the furnace, the walls, the goose-down jacket. Drop the temperature to 40 below zero, and you would be dead within hours. Your ancestors weren't. Some of them lived their entire lives in that cold. Not surviving it, living in it, raising children in it, sleeping through it, night after night, for tens of thousands of years. How? The answer isn't what you'd expect. It has almost nothing to do with toughness, and almost everything to do with the kind of engineering so precise that modern outdoor gear companies are still trying to reverse engineer it. Start with the obvious guess. Maybe ancient Arctic humans just had thicker skin. Maybe evolution hardened their bodies against the cold the way it thickened a polar bear's fur. It didn't. Your body, biologically, is almost identical to theirs. Put you both in the same blizzard with no gear, and you'd both freeze at roughly the same rate. The difference was never in the body. It was in what they built around it. Consider the parka. Not the kind you buy today, stuffed with synthetic fiber fill and sealed with a zipper. The kind stitched together from caribou hide, worn in layers by people who had never seen a chemistry textbook. Researchers studying traditional Arctic clothing found something strange when they measured it against modern gear in cold chambers. Layered caribou skin clothing, worn the way it was traditionally worn, trapped air more effectively than many contemporary synthetic parkas built for the same conditions. The hollow structure of caribou hair, it turns out, is almost absurdly good at holding still air in place. And still air, not fabric, not fur, is the actual thing that keeps you warm. That's the first secret. Warmth was never really about the material. It was about the air. Every layer of ancient Arctic clothing was really a system for trapping tiny pockets of dead air against the body, one pocket at a time, and refusing to let them move. Wind is the enemy of warmth. Not because it's cold, but because it steals your air pockets away one gust at a time. So the outer layer of a traditional parka wasn't decorative. It was a windbreak, engineered to keep the moving air of the outside world from ever touching the still air trapped underneath. Think about that for a second. You probably felt the difference between a cold, windy day and a cold, still day that somehow felt warmer. That's the exact same physics. Your ancestors just built their entire wardrobe around it, thousands of years before anyone had a word for insulation. But clothing alone doesn't explain everything. Because clothing can be soaked through, clothing can fail. And a soaked, failed layer at 40 below isn't an inconvenience. It's a death sentence within the hour. So the second secret wasn't worn. It was built. Look at where Arctic peoples actually slept. Not out in the open, and not in flimsy shelters either, but in structures shaped by a piece of physics most people never think about. Heat doesn't like corners. A domed shelter, like the classic snow house, isn't round because it looks nice. It's round because a dome has no weak points for wind to grab onto, and because the shape lets a small amount of body heat and lamp heat circulate evenly along a curved ceiling instead of pooling uselessly at the top of a peaked roof. Engineers studying traditional dome shelters have found that with nothing more than the heat from a small oil lamp and a few human bodies, the interior of a well-built snow dome can sit dramatically warmer than the outside air. Not warm like a heated room. Warm enough that ice on the inside walls, ice that should be a warning sign, actually functions as an insulating layer once it glazes over. Here's the part that should make you pause. The snow itself, the exact substance trying to kill you outside, becomes the thing protecting you once it's shaped correctly. Snow is full of trapped air, the same way caribou hair is. Pack it right, and you've built a wall out of the very material of the threat. Doesn't that flip everything you assumed about the cold? You probably imagine ancient Arctic life as a war against the environment. Every day, another battle against wind, ice, snow, dark. But that's a modern framing, invented by people who experience winter mostly as an inconvenience between the car and the front door. The people who actually live there weren't fighting the cold. They were reading it, using its own materials against itself, turning the enemy into the wall. There's a third piece to this, and it's the one most documentaries skip entirely, because it isn't about materials at all. It's about behavior. Anthropologists studying traditional Arctic communities noted something counterintuitive about how people moved through the coldest months. Modern instinct tells you to power through discomfort, to push, to tough it out. But in the deep cold, that instinct gets people killed. Traditional Arctic life instead built in deliberate stillness. Long stretches of low-output rest inside shelters, timed activity outside during the narrow windows when conditions allowed it, and an entire social rhythm built around conserving body heat rather than burning through it. Your body still remembers this, even now. That sluggish, sleepy, low-energy feeling you get on a freezing winter day, the one you probably blame on being lazy or unmotivated, isn't a personal failing. It's an old survival setting, quietly asking you to slow down and conserve heat, the same way it once kept your ancestors alive through months of darkness. You just live somewhere warm enough now that the setting rarely gets to finish its sentence. So 3 things kept people alive at 40 below. Trapped air instead of raw material thickness. Shape instead of brute strength. A dome that turned wind into a non-issue and ice into insulation. And rhythm instead of willpower, a whole culture organized around knowing exactly when to move and when to stay still. None of it required modern chemistry. None of it required understanding thermodynamics on paper. It required something arguably harder. Generations of careful, attentive observation, passed down precisely enough that a mistake in stitching or shelter shape could be caught and corrected before it cost a life. That's not brute survival. That's applied physics, refined by trial and error across thousands of winters, encoded not in equations, but in the exact angle of a needle and the exact curve of a snow wall. And it raises an uncomfortable question about your own life. You live surrounded by systems you don't understand and have never had to. Your heating, your insulation, your food supply chain, all of it running invisibly in the background while you scroll past it without a thought. Ancient Arctic humans understood their survival systems down to the fiber and the air pocket because their lives depended on that understanding being exact. Yours doesn't, which sounds like an advantage, until you consider what you've traded for it. Somewhere in that trade is a kind of knowledge that no longer needs to exist in you, because it now exists in a thermostat instead. Convenient. Also, in its own quiet way, a little bit like forgetting how to read the one language that used to keep your ancestors alive. Right now, somewhere in your house, a thermostat is quietly deciding your survival for you. Maybe it's worth remembering what it replaced.